Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts. Nashville Democratic State Senator Thelma Harper and syndicated conservative talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome and Happy New Year once again.
Happy New Year to you.
Because of our taping schedule of the last couple of weeks, we did not get to acknowledge the passing of former Lieutenant Governor John Wilder. I'd like to get your reaction. I mean, 35 years as Speaker of the House, 47 years in government. Those numbers are not going to be repeated again, are they?
No, I think not in our lifetime. I think no.
A unique man.
He really was. We went to the service. It was very uplifting. Very, very nice. He would have been pleased.
You know, a guy that really saw history in Tennessee make dramatic changes from certainly the West Tennessee perspective, the segregation days, I mean, the technology that came about, the fact that at his end of his career, he and Thelma Harper would be serving in the state Senate together, whereas at the beginning of his career, that wouldn't have been possible. I think this, again, speaks to the real changes we've seen in this country and that he helped oversee a lot.
And he was fair to people like Thelma Harper and many others.
Next week here in Tennessee, in Nashville, all the lawmakers come back, the beginning of a special session called by the governor on education. You're going to have your hands full. The governor wants some major changes to education where teachers are evaluated about 50% based on student test scores. There's some questions as to whether that's too high, not high enough. And so you got to, and if we don't meet the guidelines, we're not qualifying for about $500 million in federal money.
I think it's wonderful, you know, that we have an opportunity to make application. But one of the things that we've got to learn in the state of Tennessee and across the country, teachers need partners, and those partners are parents. Parents and the mama and the daddy should be required to participate. Unless the daddy's in prison, the daddy should be required to participate because both of them brought the children here. We give those teachers 25 children and expect them to just move them up to the greatest level. They spend more time at home than they do at school. I think teachers should be competent, and I think in some way they should be graded, but I do not think their salary and their whole life should depend on whether or not children can pass a test. I dare say if you did a test with us three, two of us wouldn't pass.
Bob would do great.
but I do think it's important. It's important that we have initiatives, and this is a wonderful initiative. It's a wonderful opportunity to access monies which would help our teachers to have aids and help our students. It is a lot of money, but think about it. Think about right here in Davidson County when we had school going on longer than a month and children didn't have their books. Do we hold teachers responsible for that?
Well, I think we ought to be holding administrators accountable, and I'm still interested to see what kind of fallout comes from that in terms of firing some folks in the administration that are responsible, or teachers that didn't submit their book orders in time. We've got to hold people accountable, and I agree with Thelma completely about that. Although I would point out that in the piece that Chris Bungard did earlier, you've got folks standing in line for food stamps. Where's the father of that woman's child? Why isn't he providing support? So not just education support, financial support for the children, all needs to be part of the package. I don't think taxpayers ought to be providing all that support. I think the interesting thing on this test score piece is we ought to be looking not just at some sort of a static test of how did the students do on the test this year, but are we seeing progress? If we've got a teacher that is teaching the best and brightest students, teaching honors courses, AP courses, and he or she keeps them at that high level, we ought to reward them. But if we've got a teacher that moves an F student into a C student or a B student, we ought to reward the living daylights out of that person as well. So I'd like to see, and hope the legislature will consider, looking at progress, not just maintenance, and I think looking at other ways to evaluate teachers that are very tangible and quantifiable, not just letting the teachers union make the call.
And we've got to look at the circumstances, too. I had one teacher to tell me, said, for a long time I put their children's names in books. She said, because we have a transient student body, we started putting numbers in those books rather than names because they move on. You're going to show a clip on homelessness. What do you think happens to children who are homeless? They go to school here a while, and wherever their parents move them to, they'll go there a while, and wherever they are when it's test time, those instructors are responsible for whether or not the class passes.
I think there's enough wiggle room in this. The governor seems to indicate he needs pretty close to 50% in order to qualify for this money.
We need to see what it says first. We need to see, number one, what his message is, and we can evaluate it from there. But what I'm saying is don't make teachers fully responsible for all of the progress of a child because parents are many of them are just negligent. In Mississippi, there are some areas that requires the parents, if the child missed more than 5 days, they are required to come to school for a week.
And I think that's all well and good, but keep in mind that the teachers are teaching students and all have those same challenges that they have to face. So you're not comparing teachers against a subset that's not involved in the classroom. They're all going to be evaluated based on the same challenges, parents involved, parents not involved. So we ought to have a standard across the board that's going to judge teachers, and test scores are frankly the best way to do that.
You can't do those standards because in some areas, teachers, and one of our schools is a great school, Julia Green. I mean, they raise the kind of money that builds another arm of the school. Let's just take Tom Joy. Tom Joy has no money. And it's where the children come from and what the parents are able to provide financially. I'm talking about parenting. The parenting part, teachers, even if they are inhibited with their reading skills, they still can come and sit in the classroom and listen and watch their child to see if their child is studying. Turn the TV off and turn all the boom boxes off and require them to read to you and do their lesson, even if it isn't right. At least they get in the habit of performing at home, and then they can perform when they go to school.
This will all be part of the discussion next week. Nationally, the president returns to Washington from his vacation, finds himself in the midst of almost a terror attack on an airplane, and now says the U.S. knew about this guy, didn't connect the dots. It's pretty serious stuff.
Well, it wasn't almost a terror attack. It was a terror attack that only didn't kill nearly 300 people because the detonator didn't work. And now we find out that this guy was buying his ticket with cash, a one-way ticket. They connected the dots literally while he was in the air. And unfortunately, this isn't the only example. We had the terror bombing with a Jordanian doctor killing CIA agents that got mentioned. And don't forget the Fort Hood incident where Major Malik Nidal Hassan killed 13. Again, all the warning signals were there. We ignored them. We've got to start taking seriously what the president said earlier this week. This is a war. This administration's denied that for a year, called it a contingency operation. Now they're calling it a war, and maybe they'll start doing something.
No, he never denied it. I'll have to give him credit there. But I think where they really failed was when a daddy takes the time to go in and tell you, my son is a threat to the nation, and nobody listens. I mean, if nothing else, something should have shut down when he goes in to say that he's running with the wrong crowd. You all need to be careful, and they didn't pay attention.
Particularly when you had even more above that, where you had him associating with al-Qaeda terrorists. There was more even above that. But when a parent, when a family member says he's with the wrong crowd, and this guy wasn't just some guy calling the 911 number.
No,
he is a top official in Nigeria who ought to have some credibility.
Steve Gill.
Who does have some credibility.
That'll do it, and we'll be right back with more on this week. Stay with us.